The sun hung low over the rolling hills of Willow Creek, casting golden streaks across the sprawling acres of Abigail Harper's family farm. It was April 4th, 2025, a day that started like any other quiet, peaceful, the kind of morning where the only sounds were the soft lowing of cattle and the rustle of wind through the wildflowers. Abigail sat on her weathered porch swing, a chipped mug of coffee warming her hands. Her loyal mutt Rusty sprawled at her feet. The farm had been in her family for 4 generations, a legacy carved into every fence post and hay bale by her father, Amos, who'd always told her, "Abby, this land's your blood. Don't let anyone take it from you." She'd never imagined those words would be tested by a pack of suburban socialites in designer heels. It began with a distant rumble, a sound that didn't belong among the mooing cows and chirping crickets. Abigail squinted down the gravel drive as a convoy of polished vehicles, SUVs, convertibles, even a sleek black sedan rolled toward her barn like an invading army. She set her mug down, her brow furrowing as the cars wove between grazing cattle, tires crunching over the dirt. Guests spilled out, dressed in shimmering gowns and tailored tuxedos, picking their way through the cow pies as if they were strolling down a city sidewalk. Abigail's jaw tightened. Leading the charge was Marjorie Klein, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, her platinum hair gleaming under a wide-brimmed hat, her stilettos sinking into the mud as she waved to her entourage like a queen greeting her court. Abigail stood, hands on her hips, watching in disbelief as they turned her barn into their playground. Folding tables draped with silk appeared along the walls, adorned with floral centerpieces that cost more than her monthly feed bill. Her hay bales stacked with care for the winter were dragged into clusters for rustic seating. By noon, the air was thick with laughter, the clink of champagne flutes, and the shrill cackle of Marjorie's voice barking orders. Abigail had seen plenty of nerve in her 38 years, but this was something else. She marched across the yard, boots stomping through the muck, and found Marjorie directing traffic like a pageant director, her smile as fake as the pearls around her neck. "Marjorie Klein," Abigail said, her voice cutting through the chatter, "what in God's name do you think you're doing on my land?" Marjorie turned, flicking her hair with a practiced flourish. "Oh, Abigail, darling, don't be so dramatic. We needed extra space for the spring fete. Your barn was just sitting here, empty. We're only borrowing it for the day. You understand, don't you?" "Borrowing?" Abigail's voice rose, sharp as a whip. "You didn't ask. You didn't knock. You just rolled in here like you own the place. Get your cars, your tables, and your damn party off my property. Now." Marjorie's smile didn't falter, but her eyes glinted with something cold. She leaned in, her perfume cloying, and whispered, "Sweetie, this barn isn't even zoned properly. It's practically a shed. We'll be gone by tomorrow. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Abigail's ears burned. She took a step back, forcing herself to breathe, and instead of unloading the tirade building in her chest, she smollate a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. "You ever hear about my barn sprinklers, Marjorie?" Marjorie's brows pinched. "Sprinklers?" "Automatic," Abigail said, her tone casual. "Keeps the cows cool in the summer. Runs on a timer. Recycled well water. Sometimes the timing's a little off." Marjorie laughed, a high, dismissive trill, and waved her off. "Oh, Abigail, you're full of stories. Run along now." Abigail turned back toward the house, her mind already spinning. The sprinklers hadn't run in months, but the pipes were still good. That night, under the cover of darkness, she climbed into the barn loft, a toolbox in hand. She tinkered with the old system, reconnected a few valves, and added a new trick, a wireless remote she'd picked up at the hardware store years ago and never used. By midnight, she stood in the shadows, watching the last of Marjorie's fairy lights twinkle below. The smug tilt of the woman's head burned into her memory. They thought they'd won. They thought she'd roll over. They didn't know her at all. The next morning, the fate was in full swing. Abigail watched from her kitchen window as cars packed the barn tighter than a feedlot, guests sipping mimosas and posing for photos with their hay bales like they were at a VY Neared wedding. Marjorie strutted around in a peacock blue dress, her hat casting a shadow over her triumphant grin. Abigail's fingers brushed the remote in her pocket. She hesitated, just for a moment. Maybe she should warn them, give them one last chance. Then she saw Marjorie pin a ribbon to the barn door, a gaudy thing that read Klein Event Sponsor, as if she'd staked a flag in Abigail's land. That was it. Abigail pressed the button. The sprinklers roared to life, a deluge of cold water blasting from the rafters. Screams pierced the air as jets, soaked gowns, toppled centerpieces, and turned the barn floor into a muddy swamp. High heels slipped, tuxedos flailed, and one man dove behind a hay bale only to catch a second blast square in the chest. Abigail leaned against the window frame, arms crossed, as chaos unfolded. Rusty barked like it was the 4th of July, his tail wagging furiously. And there, in the center of it all, was Marjorie drenched, mascara streaking down her face, her Dulaw 1,200 heels mired in the muck. She yanked at them, lost her balance, and landed hard on her backside, staring up at Abigail's window with venom in her eyes. Abigail waved, a small, satisfied gesture, and turned away. She thought that might be the end of it, a lesson learned. She was wrong. 2 days later, a white envelope was nailed to her gate, the HOA's golden crest glaring from the paper. Inside was a formal complaint zoning violations, water misuse, a laundry list of nonsense signed by Marjorie herself. Abigail laughed at first, but the laughter died when she spotted 2 HOA cronies, Ted and Sheila, snapping photos of her property from the county road. They ducked behind a truck when she revved her pickup toward them, but the message was clear. Marjorie wasn't just mad. She was out for blood. By the end of the week, 3 more letters arrived, each more absurd than the last. One claimed her barn was an unregulated recreational structure. Another accused her of emotional distress to the fake guests. The third alleged her sprinklers were a public hazard, conveniently ignoring the trespassing part. Abigail tried the sheriff, but Deputy Carter just shrugged. Chivo Ypsilon elle mater, Abby. Stay out of their crosshairs. She could tell he didn't want the hassle of Marjorie's gossip mill. Fine, she thought. If the law wouldn't help, she'd handle it herself. Then came the sign. A garish wooden plank at the edge of Marjorie's subby VY shown, reading, HOA event parking this way, with an arrow pointing straight to Abigail's west pasture. Cars started rolling in, strangers, not even HOA members, treating her field like a public lot. They flattened her wildflowers, spooked her cows, and left tire ruts in the grass she'd spent years tending. Rusty growled himself hoarse, and Abigail stood at the fence line, fists clenched, watching the invasion with a fury she could barely contain. This wasn't just about parking. It was Marjorie claiming her land, piece by piece, and daring her to fight back. She needed an ally, someone who wouldn't flinch at the HOA's shadow. That's when she thought of Jasper Tully. Jasper was a grizzled ex-carnival worker, a wiry man in his 60s with a penchant for mischief and a long-standing grudge against the HOA after they'd fined him out of his last trailer park. She found him at the feed store, elbow deep in a tractor engine, and spilled the whole story. Jasper's laugh rattled the shelves. Abby, girl, we're going to give him a show they'll never forget. Over lukewarm beers in his cluttered garage, Jasper hatched a plan that made Abigail's eyes gleam. Sprinklers were just the start. He rigged a motion-activated sound system, deep bull roars, stomping hooves, the clang of metal gates left over from his carnival days. Then he built decoy cows, plywood cutouts with glowing yellow eyes wired to flicker in the dark. They hooked the sprinklers to motion sensors, too, creating a trap that would spring the moment anyone crossed into her barn or pasture after dusk. For 2 nights, they worked under lantern light, dragging speakers and scarecrows into place, testing the system until it was perfect. Rusty bounded around them, barking approval, as Abigail felt a thrill she hadn't known since she was a kid plotting pranks with her cousins. The HOA's grand gala was set for the next evening, their biggest event yet, a chance for Marjorie to cement her reign. Abigail watched from her porch as the procession began, cars flooding her pasture, guests in pastel suits and dresses spilling into the barn, now decked out with chandeliers and velvet drapes. Marjorie took the stage in old milk, her voice dripping with self-congratulation as she praised the HOA's generous neighbors and gestured to Abigail's barn, calling it our gala barn. That was Abigail's cue. She clicked the remote. The sprinklers hit first, a torrential downpour that turned the barn into a sopping mess. Guests shrieked, slipping in the mud as chandeliers swayed and drapes collapsed. Then the speakers kicked a thunderous bull roar that froze everyone in place. The stomping echoed, and the glowing eyes blinked on, dotting the shadows. Panic erupted. Men in suits bolted, women screamed about a loose bull, and the string quartet abandoned their instruments to flee. Marjorie stood stock still, soaked and staring at a decoy cow, until a sharp snort from the speakers sent her sprinting, slipping, falling, her pink suit a muddy ruin. Abigail was still laughing when her phone started buzzing. Rusty had somehow chewed an old VYC link to her social media, and the whole fiasco had streamed live. HOA Gala Gone Wild. The caption read, racking up thousands of VYUs. Comments poured in. Farmer 1, HOA 0. This is why you don't mess with country folk. The internet loved it, and Abigail couldn't stop grinning. But Marjorie wasn't done. 2 days later, a courier delivered a county-stamped lawsuit: public endangerment, property damage, emotional distress. Abigail's stomach dropped. This wasn't petty HOA games anymore. It was a legal bulldozer aimed at her farm. Losing meant losing everything: her home, her heritage, the barn her father built. She paced the kitchen that night, Rusty trailing her as dread clawed at her chest. She couldn't afford a lawyer, couldn't fight a war of attrition. The neighbor she approached offered sympathy, but no help, too scared of Marjorie's reach. Then Jasper waved her down at the feed store, holding a newspaper. HOA Gala, disaster goes viral. The story had spread beyond Willow Creek, and people were rallying. Strangers showed up at her gate: farmers, retirees, even a young couple from across the county who'd battled their own HOA. We saw the VY Deo, they said. You're not alone. The tide was turning. The real break came when Ellen Pierce, the HOA's treasurer, appeared on Abigail's porch, a box of files in her arms and shame in her eyes. Marjorie's been stealing, Ellen whispered. Years of fake projects, padded invoices. I couldn't stay quiet after what she did to you. The documents were a gold mine. Receipts, bank statements, proof of embezzlement. Abigail didn't hesitate. She took them to the county attorney the next day. Within hours, the news exploded. Reporters swarmed. Headlines screamed, HOA president charged. And Marjorie's courtroom strut faltered as criminal charges hit her like a freight train. The trial was a reckoning. Neighbors testified to years of bullying. Officials admitted to CAVYing under pressure, and the EVY Denke buried her. Marjorie lost everything. Her title, her money, her freedom. Abigail's farm was safe, her legal fees covered by Marjorie's seized assets. The next week, Abigail hosted a real party: pie, fiddles, and neighbors crammed in the barn. Jasper toasted her. To Abby Harper, the woman who turned a pasture into a legend. She nailed a sign to the barn door: private property, sprinkler zone active, and, as the sun set, Rusty pawed the remote one last time. Water sprayed, laughter rang out, and Abigail stood dripping, gazing at her land. She'd faced the storm and won, and no one up Marjorie. Not the HO would ever take it from her again. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.